Most of my audience know that I'm having a crazy busy week, so when someone hands me a topic to do for a video, even if it's a little bit redundant or something we've done recently, it's a good chance for me to cover it because I can make a video pretty quickly, so I'm going to take advantage of the situation. So excuse me if this is a little bit redundant, but it's also really important information for the Americans and for a lot of people who are considering how to live abroad and save a lot of money and the power of being an expat. These are things we talk about all the time, but a lot of people try to convince you, for whatever reason. We talked about this recently, right? And we just did a video backing that up about all the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that people will throw at you because for whatever reason, they're trying to scare you out of either being an expat or to scare you out of taking advantage of being an expat or whatever. People get really jealous or, I guess, confused, but you got to watch out for this stuff. But I'm going to talk about the structure of both US and Nicaraguan tax regimes and why it's their overlap that is specifically so useful in a situation like we have here. And it's a bit different than people are used to, and it's kind of a unique situation. It's not unique, but it's sort of unique, and so it's well worth understanding. So we're going to get to that right after the bump. So we talk a lot for the Americans, how great it is to have the foreign earned income exclusion and how powerful that is for people who are pulling a salary, not dividends, not retirement, not real estate, not investments, income, earned income. Earned income, think of it as a salary, right? They're technically like, it could be an hourly, it could be a contract, but think of it in salary terms. That's what earned income means. Those other things are income, but they're unearned income, right? Like something else is doing the work, but you put in money, and so you're getting money back. That's unearned. You're not earning it. It's not that it's not yours, it's still your income. It's just, it's a different thing. So the income exclusion that we're talking about is the earned or foreign earned income exclusion. That earned term is very important because it frames this, right? Because immediately people are like, well, what about my retirement? What about my, I've got this investment. How does that those things don't play in? And I'll explain that in a second or in a few minutes. But the foreign earned income exclusion applies to where you are, you're foreign earned. You're the person earning the money, you are foreign. The IRS is really clear about this. The way that the IRS does its tax basis is based on your location. Now remember, the United States taxes you worldwide. And one of the ways in which they do this, and of course they have lots of options, right? They choose how they do it. But to make it easy and sensible and make sense. And this is one of those things where, yes, the US does this thing we hate that they tax you worldwide, but this thing we love, that they actually tax you in a relatively sensible way, and that we hate how complex it is to file, right? It's not perfect by any stretch, but it's much better than you will often assume. And one of these mechanisms that they use is this logic of where you are rather than where the money comes from. So they tax you based on your location. Now, you still have to pay taxes. You still have to file. Some people will try to confuse you by trying to pretend that you have to pay taxes because you have to file. Those are different things. You always have to claim where your money is coming from and going and expose those things. And you still have to pay these little tiny amounts here and there, but you still have to file. That's never going to go away as an American. Just accept that. But that is not the same as not paying taxes. And the thing we care about is not paying taxes. Yes, I know we care about not having to file, but it's not nearly as big a deal as having to pay taxes. So we get this really clear and easy beyond a shadow of a doubt. No one, no lawyer, no accountant can with any credibility try to tell you that it's not simple and straightforward because the IRS wrote this for you. They didn't write it for them. There's no legalese. There's no accounting terms. There's no reference as extra things. It is one of the most straightforward, simple, and this is one of the reasons that I say this is a tool being used to encourage people to become expats, to make it more affordable, to make it more sensible, to give people this oomph push because the government has reasons that it wants you to be expats. We did videos that make that make sense, right? And then they go out of their way to make this so crystal clear that no one could ever make the claim. No one, ever. No possible way. If you see that document, please read it. It is one of the most clear things you could possibly imagine. And if it wasn't clear enough, they give these examples that cover every scenario that someone tries to make up and say, well, it doesn't account because, and then they'll have an example that says, yes, it does count for exactly that, right? So they count on a couple things. One, it's where you are. That's why it's the foreign earned, not the foreign sourced income exception. The IRS doesn't actually care where it's sourced from because you pay the same taxes no matter where it comes from, right? So if you get, let's say you get $50,000 and it's sourced in Nicaragua, and we'll just say you're living in Nicaragua. If it's sourced in Nicaragua, if it's sourced in the US, if it's sourced in France, if it's sourced on the moon, The IRS doesn't care. You made $50,000, you pay taxes on $50,000. Now, because you are foreign at the time that you do that, assuming you truly are foreign, right? Then the IRS gives you a credit and you don't pay any taxes on those $50,000. If you earned $1 million from Nicaragua or from the United States or from the moon or from France, you're going to pay the taxes on $1 million minus $126,000 to the US, because there's no tax treaty with Nicaragua. So regardless of what taxes you may pay other places, you will still pay the taxes on that remaining amount, which is about $874,000 worth of tax. Not the tax isn't $874. They base the tax on $874,000 to the U.S. Now, that's when you're making $1 million in salary. That's where the system is not as great as it could be, right? So it's not perfect. If you were here in Nicaragua and you made that $50,000 from Nicaragua, which under normal circumstances you're not allowed to do, but should you do it, should you be tax resident here, like I am, and should you be one of those really rare people who's allowed to pull a salary from Nicaragua, I am, and you did so, I'm not, but I could legally if I wanted to, that $50,000 would be completely taxable in Nicaragua. The fact that it's tax exempt in the United States has nothing to do. Nicaragua doesn't care whether you're taxed or not in the US. The US doesn't care whether or not you're taxed in Nicaragua. Those are unrelated things, but people who want to scam you will try to tie them together. They'll try to say that the US is angry that you're not paying taxes here, so it's going to tax you. No, they tax you regardless. Nicaragua is going to be angry because you're not paying taxes in the US. No, they're going to do the same tax regardless. They are independent of each other. They're not having this conversation like some angry parents that are divorced trying to separate you for chores around the house or something. That's not at all how it works, but that sounds plausible, and people have such an emotional reaction to their governments that it's an easy trick to play on people. So watch out for people when you're talking about taxes in the US. Watch out for someone mentioning where it's sourced. That's not in the IRS, right? I'm sure there are things in the IRS that talk about sourcing, but when it comes to the foreign earned income exceptions, there's nothing about sourcing in there. After I finished this video, something important occurred to me, and I wanted to jump in with this because it's critical to have this as a context for why someone is very likely being scammed by his accountants and lawyers and is feeling a lot of fear because of that, and that is causing him to repeat some of the things that they are telling him or believe some of the things that they are leading him down the path to believe. And that is when you're coming to Nicaragua, we generally warn people a lot about real estate agents and lawyers and how easy it is for someone to scam you when you're moving to a new country. There's so much money to be made scamming you and so little to be made from doing legitimate business that you're going to be constantly bombarded by other expats who are looking to bolster their financial resources. Many are in difficult straits, just the nature of being retired and moving to a new country, often to a lower cost one, right? There's just a lot of situations that create a lot of this need or pressure for there to be scams. And so we see a ton of it, and we warn people all the time. We often forget that we also need to just generally warn people, especially people who are moving to a new country. They're in a fragile mental state in a lot of cases. They think they can reach out and get advice from other people, which is great, but there are extremely few people in the United States or nearly any country who have real experience with the things you're looking to do. People like accountants and lawyers generally don't have that experience because they have to work, they've taken jobs that tie them to a locality, and so they're the last people who have direct experience with a lot of those things. Some people are well trained, some people do this professionally, that of course, but to be a first-hand advisor, they're generally not good at for this particular thing. It's a very specific situation. But really importantly, there is a ton of money on the line, right? As an accountant, as a lawyer who has someone who's moving internationally, who's coming to them and saying, hey, do I have to worry about these things? They have thousands upon thousands of dollars each of incentive to make sure that you keep needing them. And the last thing they want you to find out is that you can read a simple law that is in plain English, that is clear as the day is bright, and has absolutely no wiggle room, no gray area, no, oh, that's confusing, just straightforward. You don't need an accountant or a lawyer. The IRS just lays everything out for you. They really don't want people to find that out. And so if you do see those things, they need to spin them as though they are complex or mean things they don't actually say, or that there's all these rules that apply that aren't there and don't exist on paper and they can't produce, or they need to keep you from seeing them in the first place. And obviously the majority of accountants and lawyers are completely honest and great people and not doing that. But there's a huge incentive for all of them. They all have a financial incentive to do this. Some are going to feel that that's their entire market, right? If you specialize in this, You could have an entire business built around people not understanding how to look things up themselves, not understanding that they don't really have any additional insight. They can't do anything more than read the same tax code that you can in plain English, and so forth. And this is really kind of just a part of the bigger, right? All these people who are selling passport services and relocation services and all this advisory stuff, they don't have any particular insight. They may have one really specific market. Maybe they know, Peru, and they can tell you about Peru, and that's great. But can they give you advice? Can anyone give you broad advice on how to move to any country? No. Can anyone give you the tax ramifications of every country? No. You have to look at specific scenarios. There's very few people who have that kind of information, and you have to do your own research, or you have to hire someone and be willing to pay someone to do research for you, and you need to tie their compensation to doing the research, not to only paying them depending on what the results are. And that's where an accountant and a lawyer, they're like a real estate agent. They only get paid, or at least only really get paid, if their answer makes you panic and feel that you have to hire them. Normal expats do not have a personal accountant or a personal lawyer handling these things. That is not normal. If you go to those people, you're incentivizing them heavily to tell you stuff that isn't true. And so there's a very real possibility. We have to assume that the person who's been posting and many others are getting scammed by people who see dollar signs and see an easy mark. And once you've gone to them and asked these questions, they know you're not looking at these easy spots or not believing them, or you're just feeling a lot of fear. And a predator, when they sense fear, they know that's where they're going to make their money. So that's something we need to look out for. So I just want to give that as a preface and a framing to the conversation we're about to have, because it's important to understand we're probably talking about a group of people who are regularly being preyed on by these people who are trying to convince them that the written law, the public information, the straightforward answers aren't, and that there's some mystery and fear and danger that they have to create so that they have this panic, so that they have this fear, so that they hire these people to protect them. So go read it, because you'll be amazed. Now, I do have a video where I read it. You can just listen to me read it. Please go watch that. Give it a thumbs up. It helps a lot, right? So that's the mechanism of how this works. And the reason that, so if you worked here in Nicaragua and you do the work in France, it's both sourced outside the U.S. and being earned outside the U.S. If you do that to Nicaragua, Nicaragua cares, and this is important. So this is where they're different. Nicaragua cares where money is sourced. The United States cares where it is earned. That's what makes them two completely different regimes. The U.S. has a worldwide income regime, and Nicaragua has a territorial regime. And these are general terms that basically apply to how this is done. So let's explain this. The U.S. cares where you are. And the rule that they use is that you're basically outside the U.S. or foreign, or inside the U.S. and domestic. If you are inside the U.S., that means that you have been not foreign, this is how they do it in the negative, for more or less than 330 days of the year. In order to be foreign to the U.S., you have to be claimed by another country. That does not mean tax claimed. That is something that is never in the IRS code. That is something that people also will inject as a way to confuse you. They'll try to act like another country has this official tax residency, which is not an official thing worldwide. It is not information that is shared between countries. Whether or not you're a tax resident in another country is not something you can prove to the U.S., right? There's no such thing. Nicaragua doesn't have paperwork that makes you look that way. You can show the law and say, look, I just magically became tax resident by existing here, which is true. It does happen. Someone did point that out, that it is in the law, and it is. And does it affect you? No, not in any way, because it's a silly thing, because it doesn't matter on either side of the equation. But it's one of those things people assume, right? This is where it gets dangerous. People assume when they're going into tax discussions that there's all these concepts that are important and universal that are not. And one of them is the concept of tax residency. You could easily end up being tax resident in 100 countries. Every country in the world has the power to claim you as tax resident if they want, right? Italy could claim you as tax resident today. If Italy decides to do so, it is the case, and there's nothing you can do about it. You may not be Italian. You may never have been to Italy. You may not even know where Italy is, but if they claim that you're a tax resident, then you are, and it's that simple. Now, if you don't go to Italy, the fact that you're a tax resident there under their laws is irrelevant. They can't do anything about it. They can't collect taxes from you. They can decide not to let you into their country, but they could do that anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Right? The United States could claim anyone is tax resident, and they do sometimes, no matter where they are in the world. They can't do anything under normal circumstances until you end up in a ally country, and then they can grab you or whatever. If you try to enter the U.S., they can charge you or whatever. But as long as you avoid those places, you'll never know, they'll never know, whatever. But a country can claim anyone is tax resident and whenever they want. It's their own rules. So Easily, you could have some small country that just says, hey, the whole world is tax resident here, and voila, they are. And chances are somebody is claiming a tax residency that you could go claim and say you're tax resident somewhere. Does the US say, oh, cool, there's some country somewhere that just made up that the whole world is tax resident, so everyone's a foreign tax resident? Of course not. That's insane. So that's why it doesn't work that way. Each country has a law about who is tax resident in their country and who is not tax resident in their country. And the US has the IRS rules on the pages that we linked and showed, and other people linked back to me trying to pretend they didn't say what they did. And they say that you are tax resident, you are a foreign tax resident rather than a US tax resident if you spend 330 days or more fully within the confines of another country during that time. I'm not going to go into the details of exactly what that means. It's really simple once you read what it is and understand. If you take 5 minutes and say, what does the 330-day rule mean? It's not hard. But the high level is you have to spend 330 days of the year on any given year in another country. So the things that catch you are you can't be in the US more than the number of days it takes to not be 330 somewhere else. And you also can't be on a cruise ship, on a flight over the Atlantic, things like that. Okay? Real simple. That's why those things exist. You can't be unclaimed by the universe and just living in international waters. If you do that, that counts towards your time in the US or not away from the US. That is it, right? Otherwise, people would just go on a ship off of California, float off the horizon and claim that they're tax-free, and they don't want people doing that. So they don't allow that. But that's it, right? This is really, really simple. And then, so the US, they care that you're not in the US. So as long as you meet that requirement, you've stayed out of the US. They don't care if it's 331 days in Nicaragua. They don't care if it's 331 days in China. They don't care if it's 331 days in Canada. They don't care if you have a treaty with that country or not have a treaty with that country. You are able to go live and be untaxed by the IRS for that first 126,000. It's only an exception. You don't get out of taxes 100%, and you certainly don't get out of filing, but your first 126,000, and it goes up every year, is untaxed. And anything you earn is that amount minus that 126,000, and then they tax based on that. So it's a huge benefit for anyone making a salary short of just millions and millions of dollars, which we talk about a lot, so we don't have to go into that. Nicaragua has an utterly different tax system. They only tax based on source money from Nicaragua. They don't care where you are. They care where the money comes from. If you're earning money that is sourced in Nicaragua, you owe taxes on it. If you're not in Nicaragua, I'm pretty sure you still owe taxes on that money. If you have a Nicaraguan employer and you are living in Spain, you may not be able to get caught. Nicaragua may not be able to tax you, but if you want to return to Nicaragua, they're probably going to tax you. That is my guess. I am not going into the details of Nicaraguan law, meaning I'm not going to go read it and try to figure out all the details, but they tax based on where it is sourced. It is different. Now, is anyone in Spain doing that? Taking a salary from a Nicaraguan company? No, that's not really a thing that's happening. So no one's really affected by that, but that's the theory. So when you're here in Nicaragua, right, Nicaragua has this, people get paid in Nicaragua who are in Nicaragua. Trying to tax people who aren't in Nicaragua makes no sense because they'll never be able to pull it off, right? It is a practical thing. Nicaragua taxes what they're able to tax. The United States tax what they're able to tax, right? They're different countries with different capabilities and different needs and different populations and just a different thing. So few Nicaraguans would be able to do the things that Nicaragua needs if they tax that way. And likewise, Americans are able to pay the taxes the way that they are, but they have to give this tax credit. It all makes complete logical sense. None of it is weird. None of it feels like a loophole. None of it should feel like a loophole. It should feel like these are countries that all know what they're doing, and the US does what makes sense for them, and Nicaragua does what makes sense for them. And when you think of it that way, it's like, oh yeah, it does. And of course, there are situations you can get yourself into where you just put together a bad combination of things and end up getting double taxed. Oh, you live in a country that taxes you, you get earned a bunch of money, and the US taxes you too, or they have a tax treaty so you don't get that foreign earned income credit. Yeah, there's things you don't want to have happen. So watch out for that. But likewise, just like you can make bad decisions, you can make good ones. And one of those good ones from a tax perspective is living in a country like Nicaragua while being an American and getting the best option of both worlds. It's not that you're having your cake and eating it too. It's that you're not screwing yourself over by choosing situations that aren't ideal. This is what ideal looks like. choose it, right? That's all there is to it. It is not a loophole, but people who want to discourage you from moving into paradise, people who don't like your decision or your flexibility or your freedom to move to Nicaragua are going to go after you and try to convince you that the U.S. tax is based on source, that the IRS cares about other countries' opinions of your tax residency. That is not in the IRS code. Read it. All they care about is if you are in the United States more than whatever it is, 35 days, then they consider you tax resident in the United States. And if you are not that much, then they consider you tax resident outside the United States or foreign tax resident. Some people will try to pretend that somewhere in that code it says that another country has to be where you're a tax resident, but they are very clear that that is not the case. They even have a specific example that they put in. What if I have no place and I'm just a meandering person? Then your taxable location, your tax base, is wherever you are. If you're a migrant or whatever, moving from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, doesn't matter if it's city to city or country to country, it's wherever you are at the time. The only thing that they care about is whether you're in another country or not in another country. It's that simple. That's the thing. It's that simple. There is no peace that anyone can come up with, because trust me, we've been through this for years. I've been through it with lawyers. I've been through it with accountants. We do it in real life. Every expat I know who is outside the U.S., who's a true full-time expat, they all do this. Right? All of us. This is not a someone found a loophole. This is not a one-off. This is not a someone heard about this. This is how we all work. Expats world over are doing this, and it's simple and it's standard and it's every day, and this is just how life is. And the IRS goes way out of their way to make sure you can know about this and have absolute confidence. You don't have to take my word for it. Don't take my word for it. It is so quick and easy to read that, but read it and remember that I'm telling you, don't make anything up. Every time something seems negative, stop and say, wait, does it say something negative or did I make something up? Now, I'm autistic, so I'm very beneficial for me, right? It's easy to go through a thing and say, here's what it says. And I don't imagine that there's something else, but normal people have a tendency to believe that people intend more than they say, which is true. When you go out to dinner, you're ordering food and your wife says, I'm not really hungry, I don't want anything. She's lying, she wants some of your food, right? We all understand that people do these things. Lawyers who work on the tax code for the IRS do not do those things. Courts do not look at the law and say, well, they wrote this rule. They didn't mean to write that rule. They meant this thing I'm going to make up now. Now, do judges have the power to make up laws? Yes, but they don't claim that the tax code says something other than it actually says. They say, we're not going to use that tax code, we're going to use my rules. That's different. But the tax code is written to be clear and simple and to ensure that no one can make the claim that it's complex or that you need a lawyer, you need an accountant. I mean, a lawyer and accountant just have to read the same code as you, and it's in such clear English, they can't realistically explain it back to you any easier. As long as you don't inject things like, but where's the money sourced from? Nope, the IRS doesn't talk about that. But I'm not tax resident somewhere else. Nope, the IRS doesn't talk about that. They do talk about your tax residency, but from an American context, not a Nicaraguan one. From the American context, they even have a thing that explains what is your tax residency? How do you become foreign tax resident? And it's the thing we said, the 330 days. There are other ways to become foreign tax resident. They are complex, they are hard, and most people don't want to do them. So don't. Do the 330 days. Now, if you're a bona fide foreigner and you are not outside the U.S. for the necessary 330 days, well, then there's these more complex things that you may need to do. I have never met a person that those things apply to or who would want to do that, but in theory, those harder things exist. But for the normal people who are expats, the people who are living outside the United States for the majority of the time to the point where they're in another country for at least 330, I would say 1 days of the year, there is no getting out of anything. There is no not filing. There is no paying taxes unless you earn a crazy amount of money for being someone living outside the United States. And if someone tries to claim, oh, but this is just asking for you to get audited, like we said, that is the opposite. Why would they audit you when they know you're getting the credit? They know that you have it. It's so automatic. It's so clear. There's no way someone would want to audit you because it would be super expensive for them to audit you. And there's no chance that they're going to be able to find anything because they could find a million things you did and you're going to pull out this one thing and say, yeah, but I don't owe any taxes. So what are you going to do? They can be like, oh, you were late. Yeah, but I don't owe any taxes. Oh, but you got this wrong. Yeah, but I don't owe any taxes. And at the end of the day, when you don't owe any taxes, that's the last person they want to audit. And when they know for sure that you're not going to owe any taxes, you're absolutely the last person they're going to choose for an audit. Now, a random audit is a random audit. So if someone's like, I once knew a guy, of course, everyone knows someone who is audited by random. But if they are putting any logic into it, it is they avoid auditing those people who they know they're going to get nothing out of. They are not wasting their time just trying to pick on the people that they told were tax-free, that they encouraged to take advantage of these things. All that makes no sense. And that should drive home the level of fear and uncertainty and doubt that people are driven to try to push into you. They want you to be scared. I don't know why people are so passionate about making it scary. It's not. But don't trust me, right? This is the secret. I'm telling you what we read on the show, and it was so clear that I'm confused how anyone thinks they can make any other claim. But don't say Scott said, and this is another way you'll know that it's a scam. They'll say, well, Scott said. I read the IRS code. Go read the code yourself. It says exactly what I said because I read it word for word. People who are saying I said, they are saying the IRS said, the law says, and then saying it's not true. What does that even mean? Think about what that argument is, right? The IRS got it wrong. Their law is something other than the law that they put into place. Are you saying there's a shadow government, that lizard people are running things, and that there is a tax code that applies to no one and no one knows about and no one's been audited on and they can never admit to anyone? How would that work exactly? Right? Where are all these expats getting audited and getting in trouble for following the written law and then being told, well, there's this secret law you didn't know about? The IRS, when they audit you, they pull out the law and read it and show it, and they have to document a bunch of things. They can't just say you owe money and that's just it. It doesn't work that way. And if you have this code from the IRS and say, look, I followed your rules, there's very little they can do, because if they try to tax you, you can take them to court and you will win because it's irrefutable. It's so easy. If people are claiming it's not easy, seriously, be warned. When you start to become an expat, it comes at you from every angle. And this is true anytime that your life starts to get good. You get a great job, you win the lottery, you become an expat, you retire, the world is out to get you. People are upset, people are jealous, people are bitter, people are confused, people are, I don't know, feel left behind. I don't know what drives so much emotional baggage about other people doing well. But that's how good you're going to be doing, right? When you become an expat, everyone gets angry with you. And these are some examples of how Americans are emotionally attacked to try to convince you that things are hard when they're easy, that they're expensive when they're cheap, that you have to be fearful of something, that you're doing exactly what those people want you to do, that you have to go hire all these people to do things. I don't know why, but there's a group of people who consistently try to make these claims, but they never can provide any evidence of it. They're not willing to move abroad. If they did, they would instantly say, oh, I was able to do those things, and it absolutely worked. It all is just as clear and obvious and simple as the law says, as Scott read the IRS code to be. It's really that easy, which you should know because you already read the code. And everything else in life is generally pretty easy. Experience it for yourself. The people who are staying behind and feeling really fearful and trying to find, and that's, I think, maybe a big piece. People are scared of moving abroad. And so instead of saying, I'm scared, and this is a normal human reaction, they're going out and trying to find problems. And when the IRS code doesn't provide any, they start to panic and they say, well, I'm sure there must be. And so they start to inject the source or the tax haven or whatever. They start adding these things out of panic because that's what your brain does. When your brain makes a decision, and maybe this is all it is, when your brain makes a decision and it then comes to the conclusion that there was no logic or facts to back up that conclusion, it starts to panic. And it starts to form this illogical framework to justify to itself, not to fake other people, not to fool anyone, it's to fool you meaning yourself. Your brain will start to create a framework of there must have been reasons, there must have been logic. It doesn't want to admit that it itself is emotional and illogical. So rather than working off of evidence, rather than working from facts, rather than working from observation, it starts to create a framework of things that would excuse the behavior. And it would be, well, there must be this fear of something happening. There must be this meaning behind the words that isn't there. There must be another law. And you see this a lot. We talk about laws and people go, well, the reason for the law is something else. Or I know they passed this law yesterday. You saw this with the dual citizenship thing here in Nicaragua. So many people responded to a clear law that had no ulterior motives, had no wiggle room. And the reaction was, well, they took the effort and the time to write this law, but they intended it to be this other law that I made up that has no basis in reality and no reason that it could work and makes no logical sense. And I'm just going to accept this thing I made up rather than the thing they did. When it comes to law, it's really weird because they could make any law that they want. If the IRS didn't want you to do these things, all they have to do is put it in the tax code. And then you can't do it. If Nicaragua didn't want you to have dual citizenship ever, they would just put that in the law and do it. They don't have to make one law that says you can and then just ignore the law they just made. That makes no sense. That's a bunch of effort for no reason and causes people to complain, right? Why did that? Well, that's not what the law says. Now you have problems. If you want to make the law, you just make it. You're the lawmaker. So the idea that people are actively making laws and intending something else is bizarre. I understand that some people feel that corruption in any system, right? The U.S. has so much corruption that, well, the tax code says this, they're just going to do whatever they want. I understand that there's this feeling like they're going to do whatever they want, but that's generally not how it happens. And it certainly isn't going to be impacted by you followed the law, so we're going to come after you, right? It's going to be, we're going to come after you no matter what you do. So you might as well take advantage of the situation. If corruption is your real concern, then what you do is not heavily try to find a law that doesn't really exist to try to follow that. You try to do what allows you to hide. We're not trying to do that. We're trying to be out in the open, as clear as can be, declaring to the IRS, and this is what we do, right? We file every year and we write foreign earned income and we show that it's sourced from the United States. That's how most of us do it. Very few of us source it from anywhere else. It is sourced from the United States. Everyone I know who's an American taking the tax credit, which is basically every American living abroad who's not retired, we all tell the IRS that that's what we're doing. And not one person gets audited, not one person gets in trouble because they're following the rules. They're doing what they're supposed to do. It would be so weird for someone to tell you you might get audited or might get in trouble or it might not work. You're just doing what they want. It's like driving 55 miles an hour in a 55 miles an hour zone and saying, you know, they posted that 55 to trick you because they're going to arrest you at 45. Why would they do that? They would just put a 45. They have control of the signs. Why would they put a higher sign, get you to go faster, and then try to explain to a court that they put up a fake sign? It doesn't make any sense. That is not effective in any way. But that's what people claim, that they're putting up. They're giving you an easy law. They're giving you the right to do these things. They're encouraging you to do it so that they can then try to catch you later in something you can prove in a court and won't hold up. I can't explain it any farther than that. Please read the code if you're an American, you're looking at moving abroad. And by reading it and taking it seriously, it should eliminate any fear and uncertainty and doubt. You should be really confident. And that's how we became confident, right? And I took it to my tax accountants and my attorneys, and we're like, so we should get this credit. They're like, oh, no, it won't apply to you. And I show them the code, and they're like, absolutely, it applies to you. No one ever does this. We never read the code. We just assumed. And I'm like, well, that's a pretty dangerous thing to assume because this is exactly what they tell you to do. They're like, it is. I don't know why. Take that to your accountant. Ask them to explain why they think the IRS is lying. That's a weird thing for your accountant or your lawyer to make a claim for. And if they're willing to go on record with that, it's a pretty reckless one. I would like to see the American lawyer or accountant who is going to claim that the IRS tax code is fake and then pretend that they have a secret code. That's how you get disbarred. Just saying. Thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe. If you'd like to help support the channel with all this extra money you're able to make because I help protect you from scammers who are trying to scare you into losing your life savings, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Scott Allen Miller. And as always, I will see all of you tomorrow.